I wanted to start off just by, sort of talking about why we did this and what we've done. What we really wanted to do is we wanted to try to get our iTwin services into the hands of our users in their everyday environment. We didn't want them to have to go through any sort of heroics to be able to begin to collaborate with their team members. So we wanted to get our services into the environment that we felt they were going to be going into most days, and for us, that means Microsoft Teams. So you can see that I have a team started here. I'm just going to go ahead and add iTwin to that. So let's have a look at that. You can see that I can find it inside the store, and by the way, it is published and available for consumption in the store. I'll click Add here, and that will add the iTwin services to this team, to this channel, and now because we have a couple of services that are available, I can select which one I want to set up. And so I'll go ahead and start Design Review first. Notice that it is going to post to our channel about the tab being added. So in this case, I have to pick a project, and I'm going to pick our Waterfront Rail project, and I want to pick, let's see, I want to pick Shared. With review and comment. I'll take the latest changes here, and you'll notice that I can set up a view. So if I want to have any specific view, I can set that view up. I'll pick monochrome to start, and I can name it anything I want to. In this case, I'll just leave it as, let's just leave it as Design Review here, and hit save. So now what it's doing is it's logging me into my project. It is pulling up the eye model and the view that I specified, and now I'll be able to see Design Review inside of here. One of the things that it's doing in the background that may not be evident is if I have team members associated with this team and they happen to have Bentley IMS accounts, it is synchronizing between my Microsoft team and my Connect project. So I don't have to do any sort of manual additions for that, right? It's trying to automatically synchronize those users for me. And you can see now that I'm inside of Design Review. I can click on objects and get their properties. I can do Design Review collaboration with my team members inside of here. I can create issues. I can work on issues. And in fact, one of the things that I can do right now is I can also go back to iTwin and I can add issue resolution to this team. So not only can I have Design Review associated with it, but I can have my issue resolution solution associated with it as well. And I'll hit save here. Notice that it didn't ask me about the project or anything like that because it already knows what project this team is associated with. And we did that sort of intentionally. We wanted a team to be associated directly with a specific project and a specific iModel to start. And you can see now that I have issue resolution here, and I can begin to work through issues with my team, create issues. So I don't have to do it specifically in Design Review. I actually have the capability to add issues directly inside of here or work through issues with my team. Now, there are a couple things that are also available here that may not be evident. So let's go back here and look at our Design Review very quickly, and we will see if we have any issues inside of here. So from Design Review, you can see that I can toggle my issue resolution on, and I have a couple of issues that are associated with the design assigned to me. But I wanted to give you an idea of some of the integration that we've actually added behind the scenes here into what's called a bot in the background. So let's get away from Design Review here, and let's just go straight to the chat for this team. And one of the things that I'm going to show you is that we have an iTwin bot sitting here listening to what's going on and offering you some ability to interact with our services. So a couple things you can do is you can ask this bot to go get issues for you by subject or with a specific phrase in it. We're adding some personal workflows so that you can actually go direct to the bot and have a personal workflow with the bot that would allow you to ask it for issues that are assigned to you, or you'd be able to ask it for issues by a specific date. But in this case, if I wanted to, I could come down here and I could say, iTwin, I'd like you to get issues with, let's say, ticket assigned to them. And it will go out and it will find issues that are associated with that phrase, and then it's going to give me a gallery of the issues that it found, and I can scroll through them. And if I wanted to use them to talk to one of my team members about a problem that I wanted them to address, or if I had a question about one of mine, I could actually just click it, and I can go into Designer View, and I can head straight there and add notes in there if I wanted to, or edit it in some way, changing the date or something like that. So what you'll see is that I'm able to use that conversation with the bot to go directly to the problem that has been defined and that I'm responsible for inside of there. And one more thing I wanted to point out is if we go back to here, if I don't know specifically what I want to look for, but I want to see what has been logged inside of that iModel as issues, I can go to our issue picker, which is down here in the conversation tab. You can add that yourself, and then that will show you all of the issues that are inside of that iModel, and you'll be able to filter them by title, and you can actually select one, and you can create a new conversation with a team member. And send that off. And now any team member that's in there would that you've directed it to would get this and would be able to navigate directly to that specific issue and be able to handle it directly. So there are a couple of ways that you're able to interact, not only with the team's tabs, but also with the team's bot. And we're going to be increasing our usage of the bot as we put more and more releases out. And we'll be adding more services in here as well. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Martinez.
Thanks, Sam. Okay, so Sam showed you some of the functionality that we have already available inside of Teams. And I will now show you the behind the scenes of all of that. And as an addition, I will include a bonus demo of a small POC that we have built as well. All right, so let's start off by talking about surfacing iTwin Designer View inside of Teams. So first of all, as you may know, Designer View is built on top of Bentley's iTwin Viewer. So if you wanted to build a simple tab app like this, you could just use iTwin Viewer, and it could also be used instead of Designer View for a lot of use cases that I will talk about here. So first and foremost, our main goal in developing this app was to have dynamic configuration within Teams, meaning that it could be easily reused, like all of the code that we have wrote. It could easily be reused for other services and various other integrations that we build in the future. Also, we wrote various mechanisms to preserve various context, that's our context, and some team-related context for automation purposes. And of course, this was possible thanks to integration with various Bentley APIs and services. So the main challenge that we have initially faced was various challenges relating to using a different identity provider instead of Azure AAD. Since we have our own identity solution, we had to adapt our apps inside of Teams accordingly, since it's not that straightforward and you have to use Teams SDK for authentication, for example, and then handle that authentication inside your other apps accordingly as well in Teams. Also, we wanted a very seamless user experience when user creates a tab and he has other team members that he collaborates with. So we had to implement a user synchronization mechanism that would basically sync up those users from Microsoft Teams team to a project context that's on our side. So the tech stack for our app is pretty standard. As you can see here, it's made of two main parts. So we have our front-end SPA, which is pretty much built using React and Redux for state management. And our backend service web app is built using ASP.NET Core 3.1, and it's following the standard controller service repository pattern. So it's very standard stuff if you are building on top of Microsoft stack nowadays. Furthermore, we have just like any other Bentley service, we're following all of the good practices. So we have unit tests for our front end, for our back end. We are doing UI snapshots. We are writing end-to-end tests, integration tests, and integrating all of that automatically to our pipelines. All right, so these are the APIs that we have used to write our initial app implementation, basically. So we're still integrating our services, but from the standpoint of what Sam has shown you, these would be the internal APIs that we have used. They should be available publicly soon. So for project selector, we used a service that's called context registry. So that's our API that lets you save context in relation to something. So in our case, we are, for example, fetching all of the iModels that are under some project, and that project selection is made in context registry. And it's also used by iModel Hub API and other services too. So, so once we picked that project, we select the iModel, and that is done by using iModel Hub API. For named versions, we are also using iModel Hub API, but as you will see further down the line, the context would be a bit different here. And for saved views, we are using product settings service, which allows us to fetch those thumbnails that you may have seen in Sam's demo. And of course, for user synchronization, we are using our RBAC service. So that's a role-based access control service. And you may have something similar in your organization as well. And last but not least, of course, for automation and issue integration that Sam has shown you and that we're still expanding on, we're using the issue resolution service. And we also have it as a separate service that you can configure inside of Teams, but for this demo, it's outside of our scope. All right. So let me show you the code that is behind the scenes of all of this configuration wizard. So as I mentioned, when we initially wrote this, we tried to adapt this to be pretty much reusable for any services that we integrate in the future. And that is done by fetching different configuration steps for each service. So for example, if I'm configuring issue resolution, I would get one kind of step selection, and for designer view it would be completely another, and if we integrated further services it would be something else altogether as well. If needed, it could be the same as well. Okay, so let's move on to designer view configuration itself. We go into the get steps, and as you can see, get steps just returns a sort of a stack of steps. meaning that each step references the next one until we reach the end of our configuration process. Project selector is a bit of a special citizen, since there is a use case. So for example, if you configured some tab and you are configuring another tab, we already have that project context established for that channel, so we don't need to show you that project selector. Otherwise, project selector does a call to our service, and as you can see in this case, our service, that meaning the backend of this app, would act as a proxy, and it would act as a proxy between SPA and context registry, and that call is made using the active user token, meaning once you log into our app, our SPA does this call to our project controller. And in the project controller, we build the query based on the URI parameters provided, and we pass it on to the context registry repository. So context registry is built on top of Web API, as pretty much any other service that I will show you here today. Meaning that it allows for various OData queries. And that means that, for example, if I wanted to do fancy filtering, or if I wanted to, for example, just select a few properties, and in this case, I'm only interested in the name and the ID of the project, I can just select those, and then you don't have to deal with like very large JSON contracts, for example. Similarly, I can do top skip, which allows me to page the project if there's like a very huge list. I can get my most recently used project, my favorite, and like pretty much anything else that context registry allows you to do. And it's all done by context registry. We just build a query here, and we return the results pretty much processed slightly. But main processing is done on context registry side, which is very useful. All right, so next step, after we have selected the project, we would go and select the iModel. So for iModel, we already have that project selected, meaning we can use it as context to call iModel Hub API. So that means, and since iModel Hub API is also built on top of Web API and supports those OData queries, we could do filtering here as well, like order our results by the ascending date, do the paging, and since we're passing the project ID as context, we're only going to get those iModels that are under that project. So we have picked a project, we have picked an iModel. Next step would be to get those named versions, and we have a method called getChangeSets. It passes the iModel ID in this case, since we would have picked that in the previous step, and it's returning those filtered as well using those OData parameters here. All right, so the last step would be to pick the to pick the saved view, and saved view is a bit of a special case since we're providing both. Let's go into the product settings repository. So we're providing both the project ID as context and the iModel ID as context here. And the result of this now would be the name and also the thumbnail, meaning that it would be binary data that we render into thumbnails in our UI. And the last step, of course, would be to give our tab a name, and then we would click save. So on clicking save, there are quite a few things that happen with our app. So first of all, we have established the following context. So we have picked some project and some iModel. And with the iModel, we could have also picked a specific named version. We could have chosen to just use the latest one, which would roll off the tip, or just selected a specific one. And the same would be for saved views. We could have just selected the default or a specific one to use when rendering designer view. And of course, after clicking save, we configured our designer view accordingly. So once the user opens that, it will show him designer view with the configuration that he has selected, and for all of his team members as well. We have also saved teams related metadata, meaning tenant ID, channel ID, team ID, etc., which we could later use for various automation purposes, including user synchronization or those issue commands that Sam has shown you. And the last step, based on the user that has created the tab, let's say he's an admin, we have enabled and started user synchronization mechanism. So that's in two parts. The initial user synchronization, which fetches all of those users from Teams and pulls them into project context, and the user synchronization that happens afterwards as well. So let's talk a bit more about that mechanism. So first of all, for users to be synced up into a project, users must have an IMS account and be federated. The process itself, as I already mentioned, is quite straightforward. So we verify that the user is a project admin. We fetch active team members inside of Teams using Graph, and we have a granular permission that allows our app to do this. So it just reads the team members inside of that team, and that permission to us is granted at the time when the team owner adds our app to the team. And we chunk the users and push them into our back on behalf of that admin that has just configured the tab. So all of our RBAC calls for user synchronization are chunked, and we also enforce the max project participant count that we can sync up for one specific team. It's easily configurable. We have added it for the time being as a safety precaution. Some other security checkpoints. So first of all, as I already mentioned a few times, we always have to, and it's done for pretty much any other service as well, we always have to validate that the user has sufficient permissions to do the action that he's trying to do. So in this case, if the user is an admin, we are gonna try to do that sync. If he is not, we're not gonna allow him to do something that he would not be available to do otherwise inside of Teams. We only sync the users that are already in IMS, so we're never ever trying to create or guess how to add the users that are not already in IMS. And of course, users that are being synced up must be federated. So in case something happens, and of course, once you have created the tab as an admin as well, you would get the initial notification informing you that user synchronization has been enabled for that tab, and you would get a link to the tab. You would also get a link to the project. And after the initial message, you as a project administrator would get messages relating to failures or any other things that would require your manual intervention. So essentially, those would just be private message from the bot to you, informing you of various things happening with your newly configured tab, where it would probably require your manual intervention if, for example, something fails and you would like to add that project manually. User. All right, so after the initial sync, of course, the new users joining that team would also be synchronized in a similar manner. So for example, if we initially synced up 10, then I added 2 more members to that team, they would also be pulled into that project. Okay, so other automation that we have and that Sam has already shown you would be our bot. And our bot is, I'm going to show you just briefly how it looks like from our code. So our bot just extends from Teams Activity Handler, which is part of the Microsoft Bot SDK. And it's just one class that pretty much does all of the bot-related things in Teams. So what that means is that it can be quite difficult to maintain if you build a lot of commands and a lot of different functionality. So what we did, we split that up into chunks. So we have our initial, like the main part is called Microsoft Teams Bot. It just has the on-turn async method and the constructor that has the dependency injection classes here. And we have other parts for it. So for private workflows, we have the private workflows bot, for messaging extensions bot, and etc. Now, offer as bot dialog, that's a bit of a special citizen. It's its own separate class, and it is used for authorized dialogue that is done privately. So we use that for private workflows that I'm going to talk about in a bit. And of course, all of those activities are processed based on their scope, where they're coming from, who is calling, and the params, and a different part of that class will be called. So speaking about team workflows, so that would be what Sam has shown you in his demo. I could also call them on behalf of workflows, as we're using our service identity on behalf of the user to perform some action here. And for this, we also leverage the previously established context, meaning once we have saved that team-related metadata and that project time model combo, we could just use all of that for messaging extensions to generate deep links to get all of those issues all together. And that would be the same for get issues with phrase, and the command that Sam has not shown you here, but we're going to be releasing in our next push to Microsoft would be the get issues since a given date. And of course, all of this is done thanks to issue resolution service, which allows us to do those OData queries and various other things that allow us to do that easy integration with issues inside of Teams. So if I go to issues repository, as you can see here, issue resolution is also, as the other services that I have already shown you, is built on top of Web API, meaning that if we wanted to do some various filtering based on provided parameters from the user, we could very easily do them just by calling issue resolution after building a query directly for it. And it will do that filtering based on all of the params that we provide on its own backend. Meaning that if I, for example, wanted to fetch something, so for example, I want only to fetch issues that contain a certain keyword, I could just reference that property in issue resolution API, tell it that it must contain this keyword, and it would return those results to me, meaning that I don't have to do all of that filtering in my own code, and I can just rely on issue resolution and OData queries that it provides. All right, so for personal workflows, we're using the active user, so you would have to log in to use commands directly with our bot. And for these, we now need to pick and establish context, and that is done in our authorized bot dialog class, meaning that we would return you the list of projects from context registry, similar when you're configuring the tab, based on your identity, so what you can see. And then we would reference that project exactly similar to the tab configuration wizard. We would reference that project to fetch iModels and so on. And for this, we currently have the get my assigned issues, where we are able to pull issues assigned to the active calling user from issue resolution and present it to the user in a private chat with the bot. And he could then open those links as well in issue resolution if he wanted to, or design review. And we do have the same commands that are visible in team scope as well. So that would be the get issues with phrase and get issues with daytime or a natural language query. All right, and now we'll move on to the sort of a bonus part of my demo. So I'm going to talk a bit about a POC, and I really emphasize that it's a POC of a file handler that we have built for SharePoint. And it was built for SharePoint first and foremost because SharePoint and files in Teams and how they are handled, it's pretty much the same. The publishing process is quite different, but we built this POC just to see if we could have a file handler inside of Teams, and for which the end result would be an ad hoc session in design review. So first of all, this file handler that I'm going to demo to you now is registered in my dev subscription in SharePoint, meaning that I have a dev subscription and I registered a completely custom file handler in there. This POC for the time being supports only DGN and .idgn files. It could easily support others. It's up to you. Everything that your file handler handles and what your file handler can do is written in the manifest. And that manifest, if you're a developer, can be uploaded to, well, not uploaded, but it could be sort of using various APIs uploaded to SharePoint, and it can be used for dev purposes, or if you want it released, it could be released. Okay, so let's move on to the demo part of all of this mechanism. So we have some DGNs here in my dev site here, and I think this one is still in process, so let's kick off the custom action for it. I'm gonna click on it here. Let's wait. Oh, it's gonna ask me to log in. And I'm gonna use my dev subscription account for this. All right, so as you can see, it would send the authorization to our app. Normally, we will pretty this up, but since it's a POC, this would happen for the time being. Let's click on the action again, and oh yeah, I think this one was processed already. Let's just kick this one off. Okay, so we are uploading the file, and I was informed that iModel will be bridged. Please feel free to close this window. Now, after that upload has happened and we have kicked off that whole process, I would eventually receive an email which would inform me that the whole synchronization process has completed, and that I can open the end result in design review with the given link. All right, so let's not wait for all of that. as I mentioned, I had already a processed file, and I clicked on it previously, which opened up that session here. So let's wait for it to load. Let's check on this for the time being. It would inform me as well that the iModel is being created, and I will be notified by email once the job is done. Oh, I refreshed by accident, sorry. So let's wait for it to load up again. Yeah, and as you can see, this would be the already processed file in Designer View. All right, so now let's briefly talk about how all of it is done. So the workflow. So first of all, we authenticate the user with our app. So we reused the same components that we used to build our Teams integration. So the user authenticates there. Then, as you may have seen, that pop-up that didn't close that contained the authentication code, we give a grant for our app to access files in SharePoint. Without it, we couldn't grab them and put them inside of Designer View, basically. We create a project context in context registry to house an iModel. We then create an empty iModel using the same iModel Hub API, where we push that file. And of course, this is an entirely internal API for the time being. We use iTwin synchronization API to post those changes into that previously created iModel. Afterwards, we establish an ad hoc session in iTwin Designer View. And as I already mentioned, this could easily be replaced with iTwin Viewer as the end result. For our POC sake, we just used the Designer View once again. And of course, throughout the whole process, we track and update the user once the job is finished. So now let's move on to the code for all of this. And I will reiterate once again, this is a POC. So let's go to the file handler controller. That's the service file handler controller. Here we go. So the initial call is made to open the DGN file endpoint. We have the DGN file handler open, and we get the activation params, which contain the initial metadata for the file we're trying to open. We convert them to an internal model that we use throughout our service. Then we check if the user has granted us that permission to read files in his SharePoint using Graph. If not, we cache those params and redirect the user to give us that grant. If the user has given us that authorization grant, then we go to our file handler service, where we get redirect URL based on bridge status. So the result of this could be we either redirect the user to file upload part, which is our front-end app part, file upload, where we can authorize the user or start the file upload process and do like various other stuff like authorize the bridge process, etc. So this is our front-end part, which would be hit initially by this. So as I said, if there is no job created in the iTwin synchronization service, we will direct the user to upload that file there. We also cache the params for that time being. Otherwise, if the bridge job has already succeeded for the iTwin synchronization service, we could redirect the user to the end result, which would be that session, or return the user the message saying that the upload is currently being done and that he should wait for the email once it completes. Let's assume that I just kicked off the bridge process, which would invoke our bridge task. So the bridge task would then create the job itself, meaning that as I went through that workflow, we would create that project using our service identity. We would then assign that project to the user and then kick off that job itself. And kicking off the job itself would create an MTI model that I spoke about previously. The name for that I model would be just the file name, and it would push those changes into that I model. And once again, once all of that is complete, the end result would be the session in iTwin Design Review. And very easily, this could be replaced with iTwin Viewer. All right, so that concludes my file driver demo. So if you wanted to explore and build something similar like this yourself, these are some useful resources. So you could find iTwin Viewer on GitHub, and all of the React components and even a sample, a very good sample could be found here as well. So I guess that would be all from my part, and thanks everyone.